Chapter 4. The Afterlife. Darkness. Darkness, but not nothingness. There was still sensation, but different. He couldn't feel all the familiar aches and pains. Someone was holding his hand. Their hand was warm and squeezed him gently. He vaguely remembered someone holding his hand, in the hospital, right before he died. "Am I still alive?" Robert whispered. As soon as he said it, he wondered why he had whispered. His voice felt strong, different. It didn't have the tightness he had grown used to. He took a breath, and it came easily. "No," a gentle voice answered. "Then why can't I see anything? I thought there was supposed to be some sort of light that I was supposed to go to. Everything is black." "Sight is a curious thing," the voice returned. It was a woman's voice. Robert couldn't tell if he recognized it. "Wait. So I died? But I can't see? Am I in hell? What did I do to deserve hell?" Robert started to panic. Everyone had told him in the next life his sight would be restored. His blindness was temporary to this life. "You are not in hell, Robert." "How can this not be hell?" He raised his voice. "I lived 25 years of my life completely blind. That was my own personal hell on earth. I looked forward to dying so many times because I would see again. And now, here I am, dead, and I still can't see? How is this not hell?" Robert sat up, pulling his hand away from the woman. Trying to get his bearings, he realized he was in a bed. It embraced him with its softness. The ground did the same as he lowered his feet off the bed. Standing, Robert reached around, testing the air in front of him for any obstacles. He cautiously shuffled his feet, making sure to not trip on anything. Was this carpet? It didn't feel like carpet, but it was gentle on his feet. It was like the ground received every step. "How are you feeling?" the woman's voice asked. "Awful," Robert retorted. "I can't see anything." He regretted the harshness of his voice as soon as he said it. But it was true. How could he feel anything but awful after dying and remaining blind? "I didn't ask how you were seeing. I asked how you were feeling," the woman responded, surprisingly calm. "I'm sorry." Robert calmed himself. "I don't mean to be rude, but you've got to understand how shocking it is to still be blind. Or maybe you can't. You can probably see," he added, bitterness creeping back into his voice. "Yes, I can see." She emphasized the last word. "But Robert, I asked how you were feeling." "What do you mean? I answered you already." "I'm feeling awful." "Who are you, anyway?" Robert asked, feeling annoyed at the repeated question. "I'm here to help you through the transition," the woman answered. "Transition?" "Yes, the transition from life to death. I could see it was going to be hard for you." Her voice was so calm and almost cheerful. The familiarity of it itched at his consciousness, but he couldn't quite figure it out. "Well, I'm glad you can see," Robert said sarcastically. "Most people are surprised at how different the afterlife is from what they assumed. I'm here to help. Let's slow all this down. Pay attention to your senses. A better question might be, what are you feeling? Close your eyes." Robert scoffed. "What good will that do?" "Just close them," she patiently insisted. He closed his eyes. "Okay, now what?" "Breathe." "I'm dead. I don't need to breathe," Robert said sarcastically. "A common misconception. Now, Robert, slow down your mind and just breathe for a moment. See what you notice when you stop thinking and criticizing so much." He did as instructed. Breathing felt normal despite his deceased state. Or, maybe more accurately, it felt more like what normal used to be when he was younger and healthier. That was nice, but it didn't seem important. It's not like he would die if he stopped breathing. He wasn't going to enjoy the afterlife simply because he could breathe easily for eternity. Of all the senses to have restored, breathing? "So what am I supposed to be noticing?" Robert asked. She didn't respond. "Hello? Are you still there? What am I supposed to notice?" Silence. This is ridiculous, Robert thought. 25 years of blindness. My world was taken away from me. Empty promises of a restoration. People just feeding my false hopes so they didn't have to deal with my depression. And here I am, not enjoying the beauties and grandeur of heaven, the colors and shades and hues. It would have been better if there were no afterlife, just oblivion, nothingness, not the continued torture of life without sight. You still can't see it, can you? The woman's voice returned. Can't see anything through the fog and smoke of all your judgment, bitterness, and self-pity. No, I can't see anything. I'm blind. Still. I told you that, Robert lamented. Are you here to rub my face in that? This has got to be hell. Earthly concepts of heaven and hell are woefully inadequate. Forget what you think you knew about the afterlife. Time and immediacy are mortal concepts. Just be present. I think I'd rather not exist, Robert muttered darkly. Warm hands grabbed the sides of his face. Robert, slow down. Breathe. Let go of your self-pity. Break down your bitterness and wipe away your judgment. Just breathe and notice what is. Robert was shocked at the intensity and kindness in her voice. Her hands remained on his face, and for a moment he realized how grounding it was. He took a breath. Robert had taken breaths before, even slow, deliberate ones, but this one, with her hands on his face, was different. Focused. He didn't just feel her hands on his face, he experienced them. Your hands are warm, but not hot, Robert said. Good. Keep going. And your hands are soft and dry, very comforting and familiar. Do I know you? Robert's mind strained at memories concealed behind a screen partition, taunting him. Stay focused, Robert. He breathed again. Nothing. What was he supposed to be noticing? Was this some game in hell? Guess who? Only no one needed to cover his eyes. They were permanently, and it seemed eternally, closed. Look, this might be fun for you, but not for me. If you're here to taunt me, I've had enough. Just leave me alone, he said in despair. He heard a tired, sad sigh, and the hands left his face. He immediately felt their absence. It was like something had been removed from his spirit, leaving a tangible void. It runs so deep, she whispered, her voice coming from somewhere in front of him. A quiet rumble sounded just beyond his ability to understand. I can try, but it's like he doesn't even want to see. Of course he wanted to see. What was she talking about? And who was she talking to? Robert, you're not in hell, but you could make heaven your own little hell if you choose. Her voice was stern. If you want to stay blind, I will leave you to it, but it won't bring me or you any joy. He wanted to retort, to complain about how joy had been taken away from him years ago, but he chose to remain quiet. His instincts to argue and defend pressed hard, begging to fight back while hiding behind walls to stop the pain of loss from sinking too deeply into his heart. He held them at bay, noticing emotions well up, threatening to spill over. What do you mean, stay blind? He asked, throat tightening uncomfortably. I mean that here, in heaven, your blindness is by choice. By choice, Robert exclaimed, defenses returning. You think I want to be blind? That I enjoyed it so much in life that I asked for the pleasure of darkness to remain throughout eternity? That is rich. The sad sigh sounded again. No argument, no escalating voices. I know losing your sight was devastating. It ripped away the life and profession you knew, she began. Yes, he interrupted. But you need to learn to see in a way that you never really could if you want things to change. Her voice trailed off. Again, he shut off the angry quip that was his pattern in conversations like this. Why was he arguing? The pain of a sightless eternity was so raw that it squeezed at his heart, threatening to burst and bleed out years of suppressed emotion. Even when you could see, you were blind. And it's that sightlessness that keeps you blind now. Chapter 5. The Artwork. Spring, 1984. It was so dark. As the canvas lay there, free from its stretching frame for the first time in years, Robert smiled. True, his initial impression had been shock, and even dismay at all the smoke damage, but now he stared down at the painting in excitement. These were the restoration projects that were the most exciting. The contrast between the before and after was stark, if done right. An 8-inch rip in the canvas, probably from something falling on it while in storage, had extended up into the frame. Removing the canvas had required extra caution to prevent further damage. Examining the edges of the tear, Robert worried that the force of whatever tore the canvas also stretched out the fibers. This would complicate a seamless repair. The paint was cracked and loose around the tear, leaving bare spots on the canvas. Precious details lost. This was not going to be an easy restoration. The first step was always to clean the layers of filth from the surface of the painting. Cotton swabs and a neutralizer lay organized neatly to the side as he stretched his latex gloves tightly over his hands. He dipped a swab into the neutralizer and squeezed out the excess liquid. Robert carefully tested a corner of the painting. Gentle swirls pulled away layers of dirt, grime, and smoke coating the painting. Robert examined the swab for any signs of varnish or paint. Satisfied that the neutralizer was safe, Robert continued cleaning the rest of the painting in slow circles. A pile of darkened swabs lay to the side of the painting as Robert leaned in close to examine the revealed colors. While much of the painting was still dull and darkened, he was pleased with how much of the composition of light and shadow could now be seen. It was a classic composition, oriented horizontally, with the lower left portion in dark blue-green shadow, following a path up into the light shining down through the trees in the upper right of the painting. A placard on the back of the painting confirmed the details that Robert had been given by the owner. It read, Le Chemin du Jardin, Adne Dupuy, 1867. The brushstrokes were thick and layered in some areas, providing a rich texture, characteristic of the beginning of the French Impressionist era. While the texture enhanced the style of the painting, it would prove to be more challenging in the restoration process. Robert was accustomed to the typical smooth texture of older paintings that didn't require the same level of artistry when restoring areas of paint loss. He was both apprehensive and excited about the prospect of working on this project. It would definitely be a learning endeavor to bolster his resume of skills. With the surface cleaned, Robert could see that the varnish had significantly yellowed the painting and absorbed much of the smoke coating the surface. Though the process to remove the varnish was slow and tedious, it was also quite rewarding to discover the true colors the artist had used and see it in a way the artist intended for the first time in over a century. Even though Robert knew that the removal of the old varnish would give the clearest picture of true colors, he was always surprised at how much just a simple washing did to reveal the painting beneath. Chapter 6. The Accident. October 1996. The doorbell rang. His heartbeat immediately raced as he paced back and forth in his room. Silly. He shouldn't be nervous. The doctors had reassured him that the procedure was safe and the recovery period short. But here it was. Today was the day. He was really going through with it. Would years of fruitless squinting really be gone? He had his doubts, but that didn't stop him from the flashes of hope and excitement of being able to see clearly again. Robert double-checked he had everything he needed. He patted down all of his pockets, looking around the kitchen for anything he may have forgotten. The doorbell rang again. He rushed to the door. "There you are," Sandra's smiling face greeted him. "I was starting to think you might have chickened out." "Funny," Robert said flatly. "I was just checking to make sure I didn't forget anything." "What could you possibly forget? This is a same-day procedure. It's not like you needed to pack anything," Sandra teased. "Come on. Everything is going to be fine. Stop worrying so much." They walked out to the car, still running in the driveway. It was a tan Honda Civic, the most generic car Robert could imagine. It didn't match his sister's personality at all. She was always smiling and full of life. She wore bright colors and tried to stay up to date with the current fashions. Sandra had always been this way. It was no wonder she had been popular in school. Not because she was pretty, which she was, though Robert never bothered letting her know, but because she was so warm and welcoming to everyone. "Still driving this old thing?" Robert said as he sat down in the passenger seat. "Absolutely. It's not pretty to look at, but it's just so practical. I can't let it go." They slowly backed down the driveway, Sandra twisting awkwardly as she looked out the back window. She slammed the brakes just as she got to the curb, jerking Robert forward and locking his seatbelt around his chest. "Did you remember your insurance card?" Sandra asked, looking intently at him. "Jeez, woman, You about gave me a heart attack, Robert breathed out. Of course I remembered my card. They reminded me at least 3 times at the initial visit. Well, I just wanted to make sure. It'd be a shame to get there and have to delay the surgery just because you didn't remember your insurance card. Robert closed his eyes and shook his head. She had ended up so much like their mother, a worrier about the simple stuff, but calm as can be when things got serious. He felt a pang of loss at the memory of his mother. What? Sandra asked defensively. Nothing, Robert replied with a little defensiveness in his tone as well. You just reminded me of Mom. Well, thank you. She was a truly wonderful woman, Sandra replied, sitting up a little taller in her seat. She continued backing up the car into the street. Yes, she was. The waiting room at the LASIK Center was stale. The beaded chain tying the pen to the clipboard clacked obnoxiously as Robert struggled to fill out the required paperwork. They never make these things long enough, Robert complained. What? Sandra asked absent-mindedly as she read a Time magazine, flashing a cover with the smiling faces of Diane Keaton, Bette Midler, and Goldie Hawn. The stupid chains. You can hardly write when you get to the bottom of the page. Sandra mumbled, obviously reading some fascinating article. Wait, what? You've got to be kidding me, Robert muttered. Potential risks, dry eye syndrome, debilitating visual symptoms, loss of vision, and they want me to sign a legal waiver. Sandra, alert now, put her magazine down and looked at the legal forms. They just have to include everything that could happen. You know that. I'm sure you have legal forms you give clients when you restore their artwork so they can't sue you, right? Yeah, but I'm not telling them they could go blind if they have me restore their work. Sandra stifled a laugh. That's not fair, Robert. The doctor is working with your eyes, not a piece of canvas. I know, but I'm here to improve my vision, not lose it. It'll be fine. Loads of people are having this done with remarkable results, Sandra said. Just sign the papers and give it back to the lady already. Robert rolled his eyes and finished filling out the paperwork and returned it to the receptionist. She glanced through it. Thank you. We'll call you up when the doctor is ready for you, she said routinely. You did bring someone to drive you home, right? Yes, my sister is here, Robert said, indicating towards Sandra, still reading the magazine. Okay, she replied, smiling. You won't be able to drive home and probably shouldn't even try driving tomorrow. Of course, Robert said stiffly as he returned to his seat. His heart raced and his legs tingled. He hated waiting. It was even worse as he considered the risk he was taking. This was his eyes. Lasers burning his eyes. It was like a sculptor having surgery on his hands. What if something went wrong? His eyes were his livelihood. Relax, Sandra said, placing her hand on his bouncing knee. It's going to be fine. Easy for you to say. It's not your eyes. Just breathe, Robert. The success rate is really high, Sandra reassured. Remember, you're the one who agreed to this. You did your research. It's going to be fine. I know, Robert consented. But that doesn't help right now. Well, Sandra probed. Do you want to talk about it? No, he sighed. That just makes it worse. They sat together in silence, interrupted only by the occasional turn of a page, the receptionist tapping away at her computer, and Robert's bouncing leg. After about 10 minutes that felt more like an hour, a nurse stepped into the waiting area and called Robert back. Sandra gave him a reassuring tap on his leg and a thumbs up for good measure. All right, the doctor said from behind his mask. That's it. It's done? Robert asked. Yep, he said with a smile showing through his eyes. Not too bad, is it? Robert marveled at the quickness of the procedure as the doctor and nurses removed the equipment from his eyes. The lasers had only been at each eye for just a short time, maybe only minutes. It hadn't been painless like some had told him, but it hadn't been terrible either. He sat up and looked around. Everything is so clear, Robert said, surprised. Does it really work that easily? Well, yes and no, a nurse replied. Most patients have very clear vision immediately following the procedure, but that only lasts a short while. The healing process will take a day or two. Your eyes will get blurry while the tissues repair. That's why we make sure you have someone to take you home. If it ends up being like what it is now, this is a miracle, Robert said as he looked across the room, easily reading signs and posters. You'll want to take it easy for a couple days, the doctor noted. Your eyes are going to be fairly uncomfortable. They'll be dry and scratchy. Don't scratch them, obviously. We'll give you plenty of drops to help keep them wet." He liberally applied solutions to Robert's eyes. "Do you have any questions?" "So, was it a success? Did everything go all right?" "Yes, sir." The doctor smiled at him. "It was a textbook operation." "Anything I should watch out for?" "First and foremost, just take it easy for the next couple of days. Stay in darker rooms and wear sunglasses if you have to be outside. Do your best not to rub your eyes. We'll give you some plastic shades for your drive home." The nurse left the room for a moment and returned with a curled strip of black plastic with a notch for a nose. She handed them to him. "Try these on." Despite being cheap, they worked surprisingly well. The nurse gave him a packet of papers with explanations of symptoms to watch out for and reminders of the proper care for his recovery. She escorted him from the operatory back to the waiting room. In that short span, Robert could notice the clarity he initially felt was starting to fade into fuzziness. "Hey, Stevie Wonder," Sandra said, setting down her magazine. "How did it go?" "Surprisingly well. The doctor said it was textbook," Robert said. "Can you tell a difference? I mean, can you see through walls now or anything?" Robert chuckled. "I think it would be a bit too much. Remember, it's the walls I was trying to see in the first place." "Seriously, though, how's your sight?" Sandra probed again. "Well, right when it was done, it was really great. I could read everything on the walls. That's starting to fade now," Robert explained. "But they said that was normal, that it would take a couple of days to let my eyes recover." "But it will go back to being clear, though, right?" Sandra asked. "That's what they said." "That's so great, Robert," Sandra said, hugging him. "See, I told you everything would be fine." "And there it is," Robert smiled sardonically. "I was just waiting for the told you so." "Well, I mean, when you're right. Am I right?" They checked out with the receptionist, setting a follow-up appointment for a few days away. Robert's eyes continued to get scratchier as they walked to Sandra's car. They felt as if someone had thrown sand in them. Robert fought the temptation to rub them. He pulled out the drops as he sat down in the passenger seat, hoping for some relief. Awkwardly, he dripped them into each eye, but that only seemed to make them burn a bit more. "I'm glad you're the one driving," Robert said. "I'm sure we'd never make it there if it were me."